JJ the CPA here. Hope you're doing well. Listen, I did an update, but I did want to do a follow-up talking about whether or not owner employees should give themselves a raise. Should they give their employees a raise to try and achieve or ensure they're achieving loan forgiveness for the Paycheck Protection Program? Could self-employed, if they've set up a separate bank account, could they just now go ahead and pull the full amount out of it and consider it all forgiven and just pay it to themselves? Well, we all know that we've got the Flexibility Act that's in play, the PPP Flexibility Act, and with that, I would say no. There's no reason to give yourself a raise, meaning no reason. If you deserve a raise, well, give yourself one. For those that are self-employed, quite frankly, with the PPP funds, technically you can do whatever you want with them in the sense that there's an automatic calculation of what's going to be forgiven. The rest of it you have to use for the other expenses. Self-employed's kind of in a completely different bucket. It's just going to be that if you don't have those other expenses, you're not going to get the rest of that amount forgiven. What we do want to know from the SBA, though, is that are they going to change the calculation from owner employees and the self-employed from 52 weeks times 8 to 52 weeks times 24 weeks? Hopefully that'll be the case. Now, remember a couple of things. Should you give yourself a raise? I'll just say it again, no, for those owner employees. Two reasons why. First of all, if they don't change anything, okay, meaning the SBA leaves the calculation like this, you're stuck. You can pay yourself whatever you want, but the amount of loan forgiveness in the application that we have right now, June 5th, is owner employee W-2 divided by 52 weeks times 8. That's the max. You're giving yourself a raise, you're not pounding anything further into payroll. Now, what if they change it though? Should I give myself a raise? No. And here's why, okay? It's 2019 divided by 52 at best, which would be awesome, times 24. But from the standpoint here, they're still looking at 2019 unless they just shock our pants off here. So it would still be based on 19 divided by 52 times 24. But I want you to remember this. Your payroll, your W-2 wages for 2019, what was included in the PPP was for 8 weeks. It was for 2 months, right? This is almost 6 months worth. So there would be no reason. So even if they change it to the 24, you're not gonna be able to give yourself a raise. They're not gonna allow also someone who has employees, they don't have employees, and now they just go ahead and say, oh, well, I'm just gonna count my payroll for 24 weeks and I don't need to pay the employees. So we're waiting for SBA guidelines on that. All I'm saying is owner employees, no, don't give yourself a raise. It's still gonna be based on 19 best that we know right now, times 8 weeks. And then my projection is it'll still be based on 2019, even if we get the 24 weeks, whether there's a dollar limit or not. If you had other employees, okay, you're not gonna be able to give yourself a raise. They're gonna be keen to it, okay? These are smart people, okay? These are very smart, keen people that have already thought that if we have a 24 week and the owners and we're including them, how's that gonna affect the abilities? The Congress has been clear, this is not a windfall. So should you give yourself a raise? No. For the self-employed, here's what I would tell you. If you have a separate bank account and you wanna know, well, how much can I pull out of it? Well, right now you can take your Schedule C, line 31, divided by 52 times 8, and pull it out right now. If you have some additional dollars in there, and you're like, well, can I pull those dollars out? Well, just know this, okay, hear me. On self-employed, I'm talking about self-employed. If you have an S Corp, you have a partnership, you have an 1120, you're not considered self-employed for these purposes. For the self-employed that files a Schedule C. There are no set requirements on when those dollars come to you, other than when you go to do the forgiveness application, here's what you're gonna include. Line 31 divided by 52 times 8. What other expenses do you have? You include those. My point is that you can use all those funds. Now, you might have to pay them back, right? If you don't have enough qualifying expenses, you might have to pay them back. So here's what I'm really saying to the self-employed. If you're thinking, I don't want to have anything to pay back, and if I have to pay anything back, I want to have the money sitting there right now, then right now, June 5th, line 31, divided by 52, times 8, you can pull it out, okay? If you're like, you know what, I need the dollars, I've got these other business expense that I need to spend it on, there's nothing precluding you like what's being precluded on an employer, okay? There's nothing precluding you from using your dollars, okay? It's just that when you go to do the loan application, let's be very clear on this. There's a difference between you spent the money and forgiveness, okay? You spent the money, if it's not on qualified expenses, it's not going to be forgiven, okay? So I know that there's a number of lending institutions that required a separate bank account to be set up. And I'm getting a lot of questions of, well, can I just pull all the money out? Yeah, you can. It just doesn't mean that that's all forgiven. You pulling money out of a separate bank account doesn't at all prove one thing for the self-employed, not one thing. You saying, oh, well, I have a bank account, I'll take it, I'll do 1/8. Not how it works for self-employed. It's simply line 31. That was used in your PPP application, which must match what you paid or filed with the IRS, divided by 52, times 8, okay? That's your forgiveness amount, period. It just is, okay? The amount above that, you have the opportunity for forgiveness on the other expenses. What I do anticipate, we just talked about raises, what I do anticipate is that for the self-employed, is that these other expenses of utilities and the interest in gas in your car, rent, any of those that you qualifies, okay, that you would get 24 weeks of that included. But let me tell you this, I know you may have additional questions. We have to wait for SBA guidance because, you know, the Flexibility Act, all it did was replace and add language to the CARES Act. We don't look at the Flexibility Act and see, oh, here's a whole new separate everything. All it did was say, strike this language and put this language in instead. That's it. So we still have the CARES Act and the SBA guidelines as of today. So once we get some updates, we'll be sure to let you know. Hopefully this helps. And if we do get the 24 weeks, then we'll definitely feel good about that, especially the self-employed. And then from the standpoint, though, of the owners that have employees, remember, you're going to probably have some additional restrictions. And then for the employers that have employees, you still are limited to 40% being used for non-payroll expenses. So when you're taking a look at that, keep all that stuff in mind. There's no reason to start doing any kind of funny business here, because why? You're going to have probably plenty of expenses unless you got the PPP loan calculated incorrectly. All right. Hey, thanks for tuning in. I'd love it if you'd subscribe. Please take a moment and subscribe. If you made it till here, I really appreciate you. And then don't you ever forget, you've never met a CPA quite like me.